Hey, welcome back to another exciting episode of YOML, a Year of Magical Learning. Today we're on book 109. And as always, if you like anything that we say, please subscribe. If you want to get notified when we have new episode posted, hit those bell. Other than that, let's get on with it. So, Chris?
Yeah, let's do this. This is an interesting one. I don't know, probably one of the, if I have like my top 5 favorite books of this journey that we've talked about along the way, this one's probably one of the top 5 most unique books on this journey thus far. And I'll explain why here in a second. It's a book called Gender Trouble, and the subtitle of it is Feminism and the Subversion of Identity by Judith Butler. Do you have any idea what this book is or who Judith Butler is?
No idea.
Well, neither did I, to be fair. So this book's about Judith Butler is I guess she's like a philosopher, I think. I mean, I don't know if that's what she would identify as, but I'm pretty sure like that's kind of what her role is. Basically, this book is about questioning the category of a woman or masculinity, femininity, how they've been societal constructs.
So it sounds like feminism and the subversion of identities. It's saying that feminism is essentially being downplayed by society, right?
No, it's about it. I think the message of the book in general is that gender is a societal construct, and we
is it?
Well, that's what the book's
I mean,
about.
I can understand money is a construct. I don't know about gender though.
Well, that's the point of the book, is to say that gender is a societal construct, and that we are performative toward whatever our gender is that we want to, that society values and whatnot. And here's the truth. The reason the magical learning is all about, living the values, right? Challenging yourself, being going through this process, learning something new every day, right? The reflection title of this one is I've never felt dumber in my life, and it was awesome. And here's why. So, I started this reflection off with saying, like, I've now read, at this point in time, when I wrote this reflection, I was around like 200 books into this journey. I'm now up to like 250 or something like that, or whatever it is at this point in time. So over the past roughly 2.5 years of my life, I've read a lot. I'm not saying I know anything, but I've read a lot. And like in some of the books that I've read and that you and I have done together and that you and I talk about a lot, they're not like light reading, you know what I mean? They're like things like Thinking Fast and Slow, and I put like Enlightenment Now and Selfish Gene. Like, some of these are pretty in-depth topics, and a lot of math and physics and a lot of science, like whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's been, I feel like I've covered a gambit of a lot of different topics throughout this whole entire journey, and I'm really not ever afraid to tackle any book, which is why I tackled this book in general. That said, I felt like if I could get through those books and at least have some semblance of understanding of what they're talking about, the basic concepts around it, that I feel like I'm a pretty smart person. Like, I don't know what that means necessarily, but I feel like I can at least understand, concepts and things like that in general. I met Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. The reason why this book even came into my life, because this journey is amazing. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, his name's Brian. We were having a dinner party one night, and a go-to question that I love to ask these days, just, the compound effect of this whole journey is like, when we get into like deep conversations, I'm always like, hey, what is, like, if you had to pick like one of your favorite books you've ever read that you learned the most from in your life, like what would that be? And Brian immediately was like, Gender Trouble. He was like, that book, he was like, I've highlighted so many things in that book. He's like, I've tabbed so many things in there. He's like, I feel like that book was like a huge catalyst for me to become the person that I became today. And he was like, I still think about it often. And I was like, well, Brian's a college professor, and he's a smart guy. He's somebody that I value his opinion and his friendship. And I was like, hey, look, if this is what this journey is all about, right? Like, it's about meaningful relationships, meaningful work, challenging yourself, all that other good stuff, right? So I was like, screw it. This topic wasn't necessarily that interesting to me, but I was like, if Brian found this to be of value, then I'll go do it myself, right? I started it. And I found I've never felt dumber in my life. I loved every minute of it, but I never felt dumber in my life. I Googled more words in this book as I was going through it than I've ever, like maybe 10x more than I've ever Googled anything in my entire life of any book that I've ever read, where I'm learning things like ontological and phallogocentrism and epistemological. And like, I mean, these are just a small number of the words that she was using in this book. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I was like, I can't even understand the word, like, this is about, like, we talk all the time about the importance of words and communication and like, and all these other things, right? And I literally could not understand the words consume me. I was so lost the whole entire time. And every single day I would run down from my office, because my wife and I would work from home, and I'd be reading this in the morning or something like that. And I'm like, I would run down into the kitchen because her office is right next to the kitchen. And I'm like, I don't understand anything. I'm like, what is going on in this book? I'm so lost, and I was like, but I'm going to keep pushing through it because endure is one of our core values, right? I'm going to endure. Like, I'm going to figure this thing out. Brian recommended it, so I'm going to keep doing it. So I fought, and I fought. And I think at the end of the day, what I found that I loved so much about this book was it was humbling as hell. Like, like I know you and I talk all the time about like, we don't know anything, right? And I really do believe that. I know that you believe that in your heart, and I believe that in my heart for sure. But sometimes you read a lot of books and you feel like you might have some idea of what's going on out there in the world. But a book like this humbled me to my core, and humility is one of my core values as well. Express humility in a book usually a lot of times, because like I said, I pick up concepts pretty easily. But I was humbled to my core reading this book, and it was great. I loved it. I felt like it was still a great expression of my values and living for two and the mission and the purpose that we're all on with this whole entire journey. So, I don't necessarily get the topic. I maybe don't necessarily think that I absorbed it all very well, but I learned that there's so much more left to learn out there in this world. And I appreciate Brian for recommending it. Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think what I was saying is basically, we don't know anything, and we don't know shit. You don't know shit. I don't know shit, right? Basically, that's the mantra of who we are. And anyone who said they know something, it's, they don't know, they don't know.
Run away. Right.
And so that is just the beauty of life, right? No one knows. There's nothing absolute. Sometimes, when we say, okay, I have proven something, that this happens and that happens. In the way that my philosophy is that you cannot prove anything. No one can prove anything. You can only disprove it. You cannot prove anything. And
Sure.
so information is always there, and they're so vast that we can't even count the stars in the universe. We cannot count the information that we know. So no one can go out there and claim that they know this or know that, know anything. I mean, sometimes, like we said before, there's a saying, no man can step in the river twice. It's because things are always in flux, right? The information you knew yesterday or 2 seconds ago has become different. It's changed. To be a learner, to embrace one of the core values of company, you have to put yourself in the learner seat and be humble in what it is that you don't know.
Right.
And I think that only makes you I guess enjoy the discoveries of new things rather than, oh, I've seen it before. Oh, boring. Yeah, I've seen it. I mean, there's nothing new for me,
I get
right?
it. Yeah.
If you go through life with that kind of an approach, then everything is like, oh, nothing fun, nothing exciting, nothing newness, nothing to pay attention to. And going through life like that is pretty boring. And we talked about the other day, it's about, humanity is about discovery. And we cannot sit idle and do nothing. We have to do something. We have to find something new in order for us to be, I guess, like our brains are activated when there's something new. But if you've seen something once and seen it again, just like watching a movie. Like you watch a movie, you have a new plot, right? New story, new twist. Why is it a twist? Why are there a lot of twists?
You didn't know about it.
Because the thing, it activates that brain. I didn't know. Same thing with humor, right? The humor always has a punchline, always has a twist, because you're not expecting that. So our brains are so, I guess, adapted to figuring out things, right? But whenever you knock it off its feet, it is when your brain is really saying, I'm really, really, I kind of excited, and it activates that part of the brain, and you want to pay attention more to it just because your brain was full. A lot of, we are basically in awe by magic, for example, right? It's because there's so much twist in it. We say, oh, I didn't know that. I know they could do that, right? So it's the inexplicable things that we are trying to figure out. That is what interests us. So imagine that everything. Life becomes so boring.
Incredibly boring.
The more you know, right? The more that you suffer, just because, knowledge is a curse, right? And this curse is different than the curse of knowledge, quote unquote, right? Essentially, having the ability to still get a kick out of a twist from a movie or from a joke. That is the colors and the spice of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't say it any better. I think you hit the nail on the head for sure. I mean, I think that's why I really enjoyed this book. I will always remember this book, only for the reasons of how frustrating it was for me to read it. And to be clear, I don't necessarily struggle with the topic of, that she was covering. I didn't understand the way that she was describing it. I could not follow her. She was talking in such academia talk that I was like, man, if you would just figure out a way to talk about simplicity, like in the Anti-Fragile book, where you keep it simple, right? Understanding something is pretty simple for the most part, but the art of writing it out and telling it and all the time and effort that goes into refining that idea down to something that somebody else can understand, that's mastery, right?
Understanding is one thing, but to distill it into a in an orchestrated manner so that other people can understand what you say, it's hard.
That's art.
Because a lot of time the thing is, we understand something, we've seen something, and you ask me, hey, can you describe to me what you've seen? Can you describe to me what you felt, right? Can you kind of take me through all this stuff? A lot of time, basically, you say, well, I'm lost for words, right? I just don't know the words to tell you, right? Because even though I knew it, I see it, I saw it, I felt it, right? I know what I'm talking about and I know how to identify. I just can't tell you about it. Just because, a lot of times you just don't have the words, right? And for someone to take all of these like intangibles and distill it and orchestrate it in a way that you can express it using words, that's mastery.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And to be clear, I'm not saying that Judith Butler isn't a master over this domain. I just didn't understand the words. So that's why I said it was humbling. I was like, I don't understand. I felt like I was reading something in German almost. I was like, my brain cannot listen and follow along or read to what the words you are saying and comprehend. It literally felt like somebody was speaking German to me. And I knew they weren't speaking German to me, but at the same time, it felt like that. So it was so humbling to know, like, my vocabulary must be like incredibly limited, apparently, to be able to engage in a topic like this. And I want to engage in a topic like this because this is important to, friends of mine. And this is important to a lot of people out there. The conversation around gender is an important conversation to have. I mean, some people don't, clearly there's a lot of people that have gender identity complications, in this world. I'm not saying I'm not going to make a stance on it or have a take on it, but like it's there. I mean, you can't deny that somebody has feelings about it and they're exploring these topics, and that's fine. Explore away. That's what this whole journey is about. But I would love to understand more. And unfortunately, I can't understand if we can't talk a common language. And I can't speak a common language with somebody if I don't understand the literal words you are saying to describe how you feel, So like that was the big disconnect for me. It was like, man, I either need to step up my game to better understand the words that this lady is talking about. We need to figure out a way to simplify this concept and to talk in common language, around what is this idea and message in general, so we can move forward with it on common grounds, so I can listen and learn, right? That was probably my biggest struggle with this book. I felt like there was a community. This must be what it feels like if you're talking another language to somebody,
That's essentially how you felt. It's like, you can't find the words. If you know only 10 words in English, and somebody came to America for the first time and they only know 10 words, well, they are very creative in terms of the words and the combination of words of the 10 words they knew to kind of express to you. And that's hard.
Did you speak any English?
No.
So how did you feel when you were trying to communicate with your classmates or with your teachers? Did it feel like there was missing pieces of the puzzle all the time? And you were like, how did that feel?
You can communicate, not at all, right? They speak and you stare at them. That's what I did. I just stared at them.
Because what did you do? How'd you learn? I mean, what did you do?
Well, I guess when I came here, I was still young. I was 10 years old. So a lot of what I did was osmosis for the most part. You sit there and listen to people, and then you basically put one together to get two. If they say, table, and they sit on a table, or they tell them to sit down and they sit down, right? You just learn like a baby would learn. You just
Right.
associate the gesture with the words. And eventually you say, oh, you want me to sit down. Oh, you want me to be quiet. So basically that's how I learned. It's basically just sit there and just observe. And there wasn't any formal way to learn it. You learn it by using your human brain, which is you watch and you associate. And I
Right.
think that's how baby learns too. They watch you do it and then you associate the words with the actions. One of the things I found that a lot of times, like my voice in American, it's more manly than in Vietnamese.
The
I
the
have
words.
a deeper voice when I speak English. I have a
Interesting.
very light voice when I speak Vietnamese. The
Do it.
thing is,
Do
my
the.
philosophy is that because you listens to people talk, right?
Mhm.
And then you mimic their way of saying. So whoever you learn after, you going to carry on even the accent. A lot of times, like see in Vietnam, there's three regions, right? The north, south, north, middle, and south. And each region has a very distinct dialect, right? If they say anything, like among all the three regions, we can tell where you came from. But if you take those guys and have them speak English, there's no way we tell.
Interesting.
The sounding and the word is different. So I'm saying that, the way that you talk and even the intonation of your voice and even like sometimes you have a higher pitch and a lower pitch, like,
Mhm.
it because you listen to people who you learn from people who had a low pitch or high pitch
Good.
because
Yeah.
you actually mimic I mean, there is not exactly like it's not exactly like if I learn from James Earl Jones then I'll have a exact like James Earl Jones but I
Right.
have
Right.
90% of what he sounds like,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
my physiology may be slightly different but I can mimic the way he say and or the pitch, right? The pitch and the yaw and all that goes with it. And that's an
So
interesting that I've noticed.
so is it possible to learn somebody else's philosophy without living life with them and observing the way that they like is it possible to learn
What do you
Nietzsche's
mean by
philosophy?
philosophy?
Because this is a philosophy. Like Judith Butler is a philosopher. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
If you Google her name, I'm pretty sure like that's what her role is. I think she's a professor in queer theory and literary theater. She's an American philosopher and gender theorist. Like she's a philosopher. She's an educator. She works in, you know, academia. She was at Yale, Bennington College. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so the question is like this book that I read from her, maybe going back to what we were just talking about, or what you were just describing of like learning, through osmosis almost, right? Like what I
Yes.
struggle with, I need to almost be immersed in her life to ever understand the words she's trying to say, because she lives in a different world than I live in. I mean, like
Right.
without a doubt. I'm finishing up. I'm on back-to-back dystopian novels right now of 1984 and A Brave New World,
Mm.
and I'm getting ready to finish A Brave New World right now. And these people, like the savage comes in with all of his emotions and understanding of mom and dad and God and all these things, and the people in the Brave New World are like, that's not how they do. They've society has systematically tried to eliminate emotions in general and for stability, right? So when they would say words like love and God and mother and father, they don't even exist. These people are like, this is
Mm-hmm.
disgusting. I don't understand. I've never heard of the word God before. I've
Right.
heard of they say Ford, as in like Henry Ford. That's who their God is. So when they say like, oh my God, it's like, oh my
Oh, my
Ford.
four.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's I don't have you read that book?
No.
It's really funny actually when every time they keep saying, oh, for Ford's sake, and you're like it cracks me up every time I hear it. But I guess where I was going with this is like the disconnect of the language, like, of what these words mean and the life that they grew up in. Like they literally have no idea that this other world even exists.
Mm-hmm.
They're both like coming together going, I don't know what you're saying. And the only way for me to understand these concepts would be to probably to live their life with them, like you said, and like, be around them. I'm not in the queer community. I'm not in the
Right.
LGBTQ, community. I don't have gender identity issues, so I don't understand these words. This is why I wanted to read this book. All I know is I don't know. Like, that's what I know after this is I don't know. Like,
So to answer your question, and I think, in my opinion, this is what I've seen and what I've observed, right? I'm not claiming to know, this is the answer to it, but for me, I think that anyone who learns anything has to learn it by osmosis first and foremost, by osmosis from someone else. Because the thing is, when you are learning from somebody by osmosis, you basically take whatever they say as true. You don't question it.
Right.
Right. So the criteria for you to learn by osmosis is that you don't have an existing framework of philosophy. Okay.
Right.
I learned English very fast, right? Basically in 6 months, I learned how to speak English.
Wow.
Right. You know why that is? It isn't because I was smart or anything. It's because I have a blank slate. Blank slate means that in Vietnam, I didn't learn a single thing. I was basically like a baby, 10 years old, but I don't know anything.
Right.
I told you this before, like I don't know anything. And I do things that is against the, like, to society expectations, and I just what I do. I just
Right.
don't agree with, right? It's not that like I said, I don't think about, like we're talking about before, it's like, there's certain things that people do because maybe it's gonna bring shame to my family. I will try to behave kid, because I don't want my mom or my dad to be ashamed of me or to get an inconvenience. I don't think about any of those things. I'm basically like the dumb kid, right? And so it's essentially, when you have a blank slate, you can do by osmosis. That's why the people who have already been influenced with a framework conflict with the learning. That is when it's hard to do osmosis. So you have to learn by figuring out what it is that you need to know as far as the differences. So that's for me, my theory is that there's multiple ways you can learn, right? Learn as a blank slate, meaning osmosis, meaning you see somebody do something, you associate some kind of actions or reference to it. And then eventually you just pick them up. There's no conflict inside of your brain, inside of your mind. And so when you learn it that way, you learn the quickest. So whatever people learn, in, like, if you right now you have no idea about gender trouble, right? You can follow Judith Butler, and you can probably pick up all the stuff that, and even all the philosophy, right?
Right.
You basically absorb it like completely, because you have no point of reference to say no to her, to say that, what you say is wrong, Judith, right? You don't know. So that's the easiest way, because you don't know anything. But if you are a philosopher already and you have another mindset, right? For you to go and absorb her environment and her kind of philosophies and teachings and principles, it's gonna conflict. It's gonna be hard, right? That's why a lot of immigrants are really, really struggling to adapt to the American way of life, just because they already had one.
Right.
The people who didn't, right? It's not about the age. But it's not about the age at all. It's about, are you willing to unlearn to relearn, right?
Right.
And so to unlearn is actually very difficult. So a lot of people who are very successful over in another country, they came over here, they have the most struggle, just because for them it's so difficult. And in order to get past the ability to learn, you have to learn from both culture even more, to see, okay, what are common and what are the differences that I can maybe reconcile myself to accept and not accept, because your mind automatically going to go head to head with one another in terms of, this philosophy versus the other philosophy. And so if you have no philosophy, you don't question, because there's no further reference for you to say, no, I disagree. Right. And so that to me is, everybody learns from that. At some point in their life, they will learn by osmosis.
Right.
Until
I think that's
until they have got, for example, like for me, is, let's say I learn programming on one language, like let's say I want to learn C# versus Java, whatever, right? So I've learned this language, right? Once I've learned it, right, I just absorb everything. It's so easy. But then when they ask me to learn something different, it's then, because I already had a language, another programming language. For me to learn the other language is hard. It's because I will contradict myself, say, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't have this, that, but I can't just accept it as is.
Right.
But that means that, for anything that we learn that is new, right, it will be for the most part by osmosis.
Right.
And I'm not
And
saying
unlearning. I think you make a really good point of just coming in with a beginner's mind,
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's funny you say clean slate, blank slate. I have it written down in my journal, like clean slate every day. Every day is a new day to go try something new. Whatever happened yesterday, it doesn't matter. Whatever's going to happen tomorrow. It reminds me to, I don't want to say beginner's mind. I think beginner's mind that concept gets thrown around a little too much, of like, oh yeah, I have a beginner's mind. I feel like it's become kind of a cliche thing to say, but like for me, thinking of like literally wiping a slate clean every single day. I say it in my tennis matches to myself. After each point, I'm like, clean slate. Like, even if you won the point, you lost the point, doesn't matter. Just clean slate. Next point. Just focus on this one right now. Like, like focus on what you needed to learn, what you need to understand, what are all the inputs that are coming into you, and like, how are the dynamics changing? Maybe the sun's changed, maybe the wind's changed. That's not the same point anymore. So like, I think that's a really amazing point and something that I would love to bring to this conversation with my friend Brian around gender identity, of like coming in going, look, I don't have a skin in the game, I guess, if you It's funny, because you go back to Nassim Taleb, like, right, like I have skin in the game on this one. Like, I don't feel confident one way or the other. I mean, maybe one of my reflections that I wrote in the future about Taleb was on Anti-Fragile was soul in the game. Like, that's the people you want to learn from, is the people that have their whole soul in the game. Everything that they care about and all their being goes toward, like for us, values, balance, like living a life of purpose, meaningful work, meaningful relationships. I know for a fact, I know more about this stuff. We are passionate about these things. I guarantee you we will have a more intelligent conversation and more guidance to learn from if somebody wanted to learn, with a beginner's mind around what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build, because our soul is in the game, right? Like, to be fair, Judith Butler, I think her soul's in the game, like, so like, I mean, I could probably learn from her. Nassim Taleb, his soul's in the game. I'm a blank slate in this argument, and I think that's a great reminder of like,
right.
It's freaking humbling knowing, shit, like, like, and it's,
I mean, and that's the fun part. Just like, you think about, hey, you're you're in your mid-40s, right? And you say,
I'm
hey,
not.
I'm let's say you are, okay. You are,
I'm not.
but I am.
Not.
Okay. Let's say you are, or let's say I am, which I am.
Yeah.
You're in your mid-40s, and it's like you are excited because you learn a new word, right? And my kids teach me how to say something in Japanese, right? I'm excited because I'm learning this word, right? This new word.
Yeah.
Think about, for me, it's when I was 10 years old, I was learning the word for the first time. I was excited. So to me, it's not about the age. It's about how you are so thrilled to find and discover something new. And that's the spice of life. You felt dumber when you read this book, it's because you learned something that you had never came across.
It was awesome.
It activates your mind to the point where it's saying, this is pretty important. Let me find out what it is.
Right.
And so learning, I think, is part, and like I said, learning for your own interest is the correct way to learn versus, just learn for the sake of learning because someone tells you. That's a big difference. And we talked about this in previous episodes, but, having the ability to discover something, that is what make life fulfilling, what make it more enjoyable in terms of, how you spend your time. You're right. Yeah. To me, it's less of a struggle when you are learning from osmosis. You just pick up the patterns. And then when you start to get to the second phase, where you start to try to figure it out and understand and trying to reason yourself out of it, that becomes hard, right? Until you surpass the level 2 to level 3, when you can reason and discuss and then debate with other people, then that learning comes back. It almost remind me of like a trilogy, right? The first one is always really, really, really exciting. And the second one was like, I don't know. And the third one, oh yeah, okay, I understand. The second one is always like, I don't know. And you remember when we did the core values quest, right? First month, second month, and third month, right? We know the first one was so exciting for the questions. And then the second month, they are kind of like lost. And then the third month, when they come, kind of like, oh, I get it. So it's exactly like that feeling to me in terms of learning anything new. The middle one's always that struggle. You did well, right? You did well, right? And people say, hey, you have
Yeah,
beginner's
you got
luck.
this. Yeah.
And then when you have it, then suddenly you get worse.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So for me, learning is almost that same concept of the trilogy, right? Beginning, you absorb everything. The second one is you're trying to understand, but you don't understand enough, so you get confused. And then
Yeah.
you get to the third phase where you say, well, I understand now, so I can maybe debate other people and maybe have their opinions, their perspective, and my perspective, and kind of collage them together to make a bigger piece and have a bigger picture. And to
Yeah.
me, learning anything goes through those three phases.
I think you just, that was such a good analogy, and it made me think about every time that I try to learn a new tennis skill, like it's a disaster. I mean, like you talk about like unlearning, I get so much worse, and I'm like, this fucking sucks, like, and then finally at some point in time you just keep going and going and going, and it clicks, and you're like, oh, now I'm way more versatile. Like
Right.
I can deploy this as needed, and people can't pick on a certain weapon and attack it all day long, kind of thing. And I'm like, when you try it, you literally, you're like, oh, I'm going along good, I'm trying something new, and then you get a rebound and you're like, oh, I'm better now, and then you try it again.
Everything that I've learned, it has to go through those three phases.
Yeah.
Back then when I was trying to learn how to type on a keyboard, right? The first one, like, it's really good, and then you start to try to do more, like, no, and you go back to the two fingers, right? And then you go back to doing the five fingers, and you go, okay, now I kind of felt the keyboard, and then it gets faster and faster. So anything you learn goes through the same phase. And like I said, even for our core values quest, everybody goes through the same thing. The second month was always the scratching the head kind of phase for them, for anyone. I mean, I don't know about you, but all the guys I've guide through, it's always like scratching my head. I don't know what am I doing in the second month.
No, it's no, I've experienced the same thing for sure. Like it's, I mean, well, it's just, there's no more enthusiasm to carry you through when you're learning something new. Going back to the tennis conversation, like, when you hit your first few shots, you're trying to do something new. You're like, oh my God, I can do it. But then you start, like you said, beginner's luck.
Then you're trying to learn it, and you get in the way of yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. Like your rider gets in the way of the elephant.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're totally right. Like, I mean, it's always like those next few iterations around it, and you start to try to deploy it. Like it's just got to be willing to wade through the valley of suck, of going.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is a learning trajectory. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there will be learning by osmosis, and that's going to be the first type of learning. And I know that works, and that will happen to anyone in their lifetime, regardless. But it's not always the case, right? First you learn with osmosis. The second is once you have it, then you're going to struggle trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong.
Right.
And so the question we ask is, do you learn by osmosis? Can you absorb all the philosophy? If I learn English from somebody in the beginning, I mimic the way they sound.
Right.
And I sound like that person. If I learn from a woman, then I sound like a woman. I just do. If I learn from James Earl Jones, then I could be a voice actor now.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So, you know what I mean? That's what I've noticed. And for each of the language that you've learned, you will have a distinct voice. Your voice doesn't carry over from one language to another.
Yeah, I love it. That's such a good reminder.
I should learn from Matthew McConaughey, having this midnight DJ voice, like Chris Watts was saying.
I would love to speak British, either that or have an Australian accent. Like that would be, it's just fun.
Right.
I mean,
like I said, you only have that window of opportunity in the beginning when you knew nothing. Right. But you already heard it a few times, then it's no longer the window of opportunity, no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like osmosis and immersion matters. And I think that is one way to learn it. So I remember I lived in Chicago for a couple summers, and I went to school at Purdue, which is pretty close to Chicago. And I came back home to Indy, and I felt like I was talking like a Chicagoan. I could hear it in my voice. My friends could hear it. And they're like, why are you talking? I didn't hear it in my own voice. And I was like, what are you talking? And then I started to kind of hear it a little bit as I was outside of that environment, and the way that the particular little words and O's and whatever and things like that.
The thing is, you always learn how to speak English when you grow up in Indy, right?
Right.
That's why you can tell the difference.
Right.
But if you never had it and you live in Chicago and people say, what are you saying? You will never know. You cannot tell the difference, because that's the first language that you hear, that you mimic. If they tell you sound weird, you can't understand why. You just can't.
True.
Because there's nothing for you to compare against.
think about like a Boston or New York accent. They sound just like idiots, and I'm like, how does all these people just continue to churn out this idiotic,
they cannot
accent?
tell the
Like,
difference because
I
there's
know they
nothing to
can't.
compare against.
These poor little kids grew up, saying "wicked awesome," and you're like, what? Just stop. Like, just speak speak normal. All right, I think we've
I mean,
officially hit.
it's part of learning, and I
Right.
think that's why it's really exciting. And I've noticed these patterns in learning, right? And I think that, I guess, fitting for the topic today is one of core values to learn and to be in a place where we are totally blank slate.
Humble.
It's very humbling.
Yeah, blank, beginner's mind, clean slate.
But you don't get this opportunity that often.
You don't. Like, it was rare. I mean, we're 200 plus books into it. I think I can honestly say, if I just do a quick recall in my brain right now of books that I've been just like, I don't know what the hell is going on. Gender Trouble is one of them. A Brief History of Time was another one of them. Stephen Hawking's book. I would say at least half of the self, because it was so math and stat heavy. Beyond that, I mean, I feel like those are probably the three that I'm just like physics is a whole nother language, right? I mean, like that's like, I mean, you're hearing quacks or whatever the hell, and black holes, and what, like, I mean, oh my god. Anyway,
physics.
my brain, quantum, yeah. My brain is like, string theory. You're hearing all these other words that you're like, this is like another language. I mean, I would only ever be able to learn physics if I probably went and like hung out with Sheldon Cooper every single day for the next like 5 years of my life, and watched him discuss,
The thing is that's the opportunity, because you haven't had any kind of influence in the science for you to say, hey, I want to pick the best guy. Let's say Sheldon Cooper, right? You can actually learn from him because your mind is really at all with the newness of information. You can learn a lot from that guy and you become just like him.
Yeah.
But because for me, is I already had a science, right? So for me to go learn from Sheldon Cooper is not going to be as fun, just because I would disagree with some aspect, and then I wouldn't understand in other aspects, just because what happened is there is a bias that I already have, right? And that bias may not be what he's thinking. And so that creates confusions. Because if I tell you, I'm going to Disneyland, right? And on the way, I saw a duck, right? That had a scarf on its neck, right? What do you think about?
You mean Daphne?
Exactly. You think about a Disney character because I anchor you on going to Disney. And so that's the problem, is because I'm anchored on something else, but Sheldon Cooper is talking about an actual duck, for example, right? Then that story, I completely have a misinformation because my bias is already anchored on something else. And so that's why it's difficult. And that's what I'm saying is the opportunity for you to have a blank slate in beginner's mind is very rare.
I mean, it's not only rare, it's hard, and it's important. Like, I don't know if you ever...
And then you go on doubt yourself, how come he's explaining this, but I don't get it? He's explaining the black hole or event horizon, right? What the hell is an event horizon? But I don't understand, because the word horizon was on another definition, right? I cannot get away from the fact that I knew something previously, and that gets in the way of me learning the next thing. Just like 100%. When you're talking about playing tennis, right? In the beginning, you have nothing to get in your way, and then you just hit it and you have beginner's luck, quote unquote. And then you start to learn, okay, this is how the mechanics work. Then you get in the way of yourself. That's what I meant, right? Because the thing is, when you say black hole, right? When I hear the word black hole, it's basically, I'm imagining a dirt hole, right? That dirt hole in my mind is actually in the way of me trying to understand what a black hole is. So that's the thing is, a blank slate is always one of those, I guess, would be the fortunate event that you get from time to time, and you should embrace it.
Agreed. And we have a blank slate with Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. So embrace it. Listen to people out there, and learn and be humbled. And that's not a bad thing. Like, being humbled is not a bad thing. Being humbled is a good thing. So if you look at it from the right perspective. So wrapping up today, I guess the question we can leave with everybody, similar to what we've been talking about, is when was the last time that you reminded yourself that you still don't know anything. And if you haven't, then go do it. Like, go try something new. Go be a beginner somewhere. Go learn a
find
new
something that
language.
you are really know nothing about.
Zero.
These are your opportunity to use your osmosis.
I love it. So go find those opportunities and live the values of being humble. I will look forward to talking to you guys next time. Tell us about your story. You go ahead and do it.
Right.
Any final thoughts?
Find that oasis to observe whatever you can. To me, that's the most exciting part of your quest, your journey.
Agreed.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see y'all tomorrow, and have a great night.
You too.